Well, an opportunity to talk about.
And seriously, I saw her this afternoon. She did not have gray hair right here. She does now.
Thank you. I should have introduced him too. That's why I had a flavor to make sure that. Well, I just started at the beginning, which is such a good start. I just sort of measure F. The measure is called Pixar Streets. And measure F is it's not there. Well, why don't we just begin and just slide?
Presentation.
Can we expose somehow? I don't get them. Stop right there. That works. So what it tells us is the information provided comes from two main sources. The one source is the impartial analysis of our city attorney. The opposition measures come from Summit County Registrar of Voters. It's listed. Click the next slide. Is it going to
Can you, no. So how it works is that it's delayed like 10 seconds on the YouTube. So if you play it here, it will like sound double, like a loop. So I want to mute YouTube here, but everybody else on the web will be able to hear it. Okay?
Go back one slide. Okay, so just very quickly, because I don't want to get us off. The whole goal tonight is for you to get an understanding of the issue that's being fiscal impacts. We're going to try to provide a sense of how did this initiative actually what all about, and then we're going to talk about the perspective of, and the goal against. So what's Measure F? Measure F is fix our streets. It is citizen driven. The measure legally restricts the use of tax revenues for a very specific purpose. That purpose is identified in the measure. It says that it is used for repair, maintaining, and improving Benicia streets, roads, sidewalks, potholes, and if the measure doesn't pass, then the city will continue to receive the 1.75% sales tax that it currently collects, but it will not have additional funding that would be by this 0.5% sales tax. Now, next, this is what the supporters of Measure F, that again, it's citizens driven, trying to address the significant road repair backlog, totals over $60 million. Tax is projected to raise $4 million to the supporters. They say that Measure F will help to repair, to provide support structure for the streets. It would levy a 0.5-cent sales tax on retail sales paycheck and includes exemptions for items, list food items purchased from grocery stores. The revenue will help to improve safety, overall condition, infrastructure, vehicles, cyclists, pedestrians. The funds collected will be kept separate from the fund and the explicit purpose stated in the measure. It does establish a citizen supporters say. It establishes a citizen oversight committee that requires an audit to ensure transparency. Voters will retain the right to repeal the tax at any time. Now, going on to measures that Benicia increased the sales in March of 2024. Comments also say that legally flawed because it is an advisory amendment. Ordinance be proposed. Simple declarative language. They say that no legislation. It also lacks an enacting clause that is in fact required by state law. Such a clause is as an advisory clause. They feel that the city's attorney summary is twice as long as the measure. They find it poisonous to the measure. The more substantive language revises and amends Measure F, which is prohibited by state law. And finally, those that oppose it doesn't require a, but rather requests that the city council create. Now, a yes vote would in fact levy the tax. We keep the measure, the tax structure as it currently exists. 750 currently collected. Yeah. Additional funding for the purposes that are outlined in Measure F. Questions for clarification? Yes.
Is the 1.75 also specific to the roads? That's part of the general fund?
Yeah, that's part of the general fund. That's what he should. It's my plan to that. Thank you, Tamara, for being here tonight to be able to answer objectively questions. All right, so we're going to go on then.
I gotta tell you, I'll be so glad when I'm done with GNH. I could do this 10 months instead of. And given my white hair has gotten whiter about. It is a companion measure, GNH. They go together. You're going to be asked to vote on them separately. But I'm sorry, I've got to get my page now here. Okay, sorry, folks. All right. Measure G. So I'm going to do a little bit separate and then sometimes together. What Measure G asks is, it changes Benicia from a general law city to a charter city. So what that means, a general law city is governed by the laws of the state of California. A charter city is authorized to govern, chartered cities are authorized to govern themselves, free of state intrusion on matters deemed to be municipal affairs. It was brought forward by a resolution of the Benicia City Council. The measure says that it would adopt a charter with the limited and sole purpose of allowing voters to implement a real property transfer tax via Measure H. So this is a mechanism to allow Measure H to be on the ballot and to be implemented. Measure H establishes a new tax on the conveyance of real property at the rate of $4 per $1,000. So it's a tiered tax. So that depending on the price of the tax base changes. So if it's under $2 million, it's $4 per $1,000. If it's, I'm not sure if it's going to be on the next one or not, 2 million to $10 million value, it's $6, and over 10 millions, it's $8. So let me say what that means, because like those numbers don't mean much. I don't know if you know this, the average price of a home in Benicia currently is $853,000, which is rather amazing statement. The tax is levied when the house is sold. It can either be paid for by the buyer or the seller. That's negotiated between the two of them. The tax on an $850,000 home would be $3,412. There are exemptions if you sell your home to a family member, child, spouse, parent, grandparent, siblings, you don't pay the tax. If you put your house into a trust, you don't pay the tax. Otherwise, the taxes comes about when the home is sold. It is subject to annual audit, tax money, and this tax money, unlike is general fund money. It's not earmarked towards one specific things. It will go to the general fund. I think it's the next slide, David. Supporters. So supporters, in this case, it's both GNH supporters, similar things. Measure G will allow Measure 8 to fix deteriorating roads, repair facilities such as the pool, the libraries, shorelines, in addition to roads and infrastructure. So it has more flexibility than a simple Measure F would have. Measure H is part of a comprehensive plan that the city leaders have put forward as a solution in order to address our fiscal challenge. Supporters of Measure H say the passage will help fund public safety. It will continue to allow us to have the services and facilities that we have come to expect. It will keep our property values high. Opponents of Measure G. So there's opponents. Opponents' statements were broken out by G and H, not lumped together. Opponents of Measure G say the measure is not needed because the Benicia already has a transfer tax of 55 cents per $1,000, which can't be raised because of statewide caps. So the opponents say this is an end run around the existing caps that the state puts on it. This is the way to raise that. They say that revenues will go to the general fund, and so there's less accountability. It will give the green light to City Hall to increase. The other concern is that Measure G gives the green light to city to increase taxes, fees, and assessments for anything, not just for infrastructure beyond the statewide cap. Proponents are concerned about changing 170 years of history due to poor fiscal management for 2024. Their concern is that their city is on track to spend $41 million on payroll, almost 20% more than last year. Opponents Measure H say that the city has a spending problem and wants to solve it by making home ownership more expensive. That would receive less revenue when you sold your home, and that they would make it more expensive for your children and grandchildren to buy a home. Opponents say Measure H is a raid on the equity buildup of your home. The city will take equity and use it to pay for unmet financial needs in the future. It would make our housing crisis worse. There were rebuttals to both the support and the opposition of Measure G and H. So a yes vote on Measure H adopts the real property transfer tax ordinance. A no vote rejects the property tax transfer ordinance. If G were to not pass, but H were to pass, the ordinance could not go into effect. There's a requirement that G has to pass in order to allow the city to levy H. That's as clear as mud? No, you got that? Took me a little bit of time to figure it out. All right. Any questions or clarifying questions about that? Yes, I knew there would be. Go for it. Yeah.
I'm saying G makes us Harbor City.
Yes.
That's beyond just this Measure H. It's
Well, that's a point of depending on who you read. So I have the measure here. Got my thing. So let me see what it says. I'm not going to tell you one way or another. I can tell you that there's controversy around that.
Good question.
Thank you. The question was, if Measure G passes and becomes a charter city, does that allow it to be a charter city? All areas are only limited to the tax, the transfer tax. Is that correct? Okay. Okay. And what I was going to do to answer before, but thank you both, gentlemen, but I was going to read what the ordinance says. Let me do that. And is that okay? Okay. The proposed city Benicia charter specifically provides that the city's new powers over municipal affairs will be limited solely to municipal revenue, including taxation and assessment, and a system for imposition, levy, and collection of real tax. In all other respects, the powers of the city shall remain as they currently are. constrained by subject to and governed by the general laws of the state of California. So the wording is, say it one more time. The charter specifically provides that the city's new powers over municipal affairs will be limited solely to municipal revenue, including taxation and assessment, and a system for imposition, levy, and collection of real property transfer tax. Yes. Okay, gentlemen, you want to weigh in on what that means, because it's
Way out of date.
What are you standing up for?
Well, you want to say something? Sure, Kristen.
make it clear.
So that was obviously the city attorney's. You know, thank you, yes. I'm the city manager of the city. So good evening, everybody. And so, and Chris is here. He's also, Shinfield, he's one of the authors of the opposition. And so this isn't a debate. I think both of us are here to just provide answers. There's a disagreement. And I would say that we made it very clear that the charter city is for the sole and limited purpose to allow the city of Benicia to implement a real property transfer tax. Through the code in California that Janice just referenced is taxation. And so I'll let Chris speak for himself. He suggested, well, that means the city can raise any fee we wanted to. Well, that's not the case. We already have the ability to do that without the charter city. And to the extent that we can't, for example, for water rates, or if we were to go have assessments for our parks, that would require a Proposition 218 ballot. So there's nothing, as the administrator of the city and having the work of the city attorney, I'm telling you that the only change is to allow you, the voters, the opportunity to implement a real property transfer tax. And I'll let Chris offer another opinion.
I do agree with Mario on one point. My name is Chris Shenfield, by the way. I'm an attorney, been an attorney for 29 years, and I'm head of the committee against measures G and H. I do agree with Mario on one thing. The city's description of the ballot measure claims that it's only for the purpose of instituting real property transfer tax. But if you read section 200 of the ordinance that's going to be in your ballot materials, it clearly states that it's a charter city for the purpose of revenues, assessments, and taxation, and imposition of a transfer tax. And I don't think you need to be an attorney to know that and does not mean only. And with respect as far as the other items, the city's been a charter city, been a general law city for 173 years. Yes, there are some things that the city can do without converting to a charter city, but there's a number of other revenue raising measures they cannot do unless they convert to a charter city, by which they won't be subject to the state law caps. So I do have a disagreement with my friend here, Mr. Giuliani, about that issue. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
What we said at the beginning is we don't want to debate the issue, but we want clarity. You can see that the language is clear as mud. So we want to talk this to see if you could get some additional clarity. They may not see it the same as we heard here, but what we do have is, the outline of what's going on. And in the slides, I think the previous slide, it does have the reference that Chris made to the specific element in the ordinance. So if you want to look that up, feel free to do that. And that's why we're kind of doing that. So you kind of understood what you said that if we become a charter city, then H could be implemented. But what if the charter city passes and H doesn't?
Well, there won't. We would be a charter city, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question.
I'll get you. Sorry, Mario.
Great question. So if if G passes, then it affords the city an opportunity to go to the voters again, only during council elections. So you can't do it during primaries. You can only do it during general elections when a council member is up for election. So it'll be even years. So the next opportunity that the city council would have put it on the ballot, week 26, 28, so. So the next question may be asked, well, what happens if H passes and G doesn't? Nothing, right? You have to have both passed to implement the transfer tax.
We have a question back here.
If Mario said, he said that we already have the ability to tax, again and again. So wouldn't that make the opposition null and void?
No, we don't have the option.
No, there's not an opportunity. The only charter cities have the ability to implement a real property transfer tax. Now, as noted earlier, we have something called the documentary transfer tax. Right? It's $1.10. When you sell your home, it's $1.10 that is assessed. 55 cents goes to Solano County, 55 cents stays with the city of Benicia, and it's to do as it says, to maintain the records of properties. Now, one thing noted is if G and H do pass, that 55 cents the city of Benicia gets for the documentary transfer tax goes to the Solano County. I'll get to keep it. So we would only keep if you're under $2 million, that $4 per $1,000 if the both those measures pass.
All right. Yes, Candy.
That didn't really answer my question. Mario, you said that we already have the ability to tax, and the opposition is saying that if this passes, it gives you the right to tax and tax and tax again.
Okay, so Chris was noting that in the kind of legal dialogue that's needed per state of California to implement something. So when you're talking about the taxation code, that is boilerplate language that is used. And the purpose of that boilerplate language is to allow a city, once they become a charter, to implement a real property transfer tax. Right, when you go to use city services and you go to file a permit, you pay more today than you did a year ago or 2 years ago. We didn't give you a charter city for that. When you pay certain fees, whether it's using a library, or renting out this room, or going to the community center, we didn't need to be a charter city to do that. We already have that power as a general law city. There are special fees that cities, in Benicia's case, because we have our own water district, when we raise our water fees, you all get a ballot. That's still going to be required if this passes. If we want to raise our park fees, which we will entertain in 2025, you all will have to get a ballot and vote on that. The charter city does no change on that. And I will say, as the administrator of the tax and the city council who's put this on, we have all publicly said it is for the sole and limited purpose of implementing a real property transfer tax. So you have that memorialized on record by the people that are implementing that proposed tax.
I think we'll take one more question. Kathy, you have a question, and then we need to move on to the state.
Same thing from the other side. Every change has many unintended consequences.
In the USA.
What are the?
What are the unintended consequences of becoming a charter city?
I've been an attorney for 29 years. There's a reason why they become a charter city, because they're no longer going to be subject to the statewide caps. If the state comes in and has a limitation on various fees and assessments with the city, if the city is a charter city, they're going to have the power over the municipal affairs. They're not going to be subject to that. Mr. Giuliani is correct that there are some fees and assessments that the city can raise without becoming a charter city. But there are other fees and assessment taxes that they could raise if they become a charter city that they can't raise as a general law city. The transfer tax is not the only thing. But charter cities don't become charter cities only so that they can raise a transfer tax. And while the city attorney may have memorialized in writing that that's what they say it's for, the ordinance itself that is in your ballot materials, section 200, does not state it is only for the purpose of the transfer tax. It states it's a charter city for the purpose of tax revenues and assessments, and imposition of transfer. So it's not limited only to that by the terms of the ordinance. Thank you.
Chris, can you name one? Can you name a tax?
I'm answering questions from the audience.
No, but I'd be helpful, right, to understand. You're suggesting that any taxes or fees the city can levy in addition to the real property transfer tax. Can you name one?
Any of the taxes that are limited by state law, okay, can be raised without, if it's a charter city, they're no longer going to be subject to those caps. I'm not going to go through every single one. There's a lot of, I'm not answering questions from you, Mario. I'm answering questions from the audience.
Oh, this isn't what it's about.
Correct. The charter stated, yeah.
The question, in case you couldn't hear, is the difference public affairs and municipal affairs, because some people in the back will never.
So municipal affairs is described through the California Constitution on what a charter city can encompass. So it can be a variety of things. We're talking today about taxes. It could be about bidding procurement process. It could be about term limits for city council members. It could be about certain requirements for various labor laws that you have in charter cities that you would not have in a general law city. None of those are impacted in the charter city that the city of Benicia is proposing, because it's for the sole limited purpose of the real property transfer tax. So the variety of things that you would see, and so for example, just Vallejo, it's not included in Benicia. Correct.
Thank you for the rich conversation. I hope understand that there's some complexities to this. And there are resources for you to look into further. I am going to move on to the state propositions because there's 10 of them. The first one I'm going to talk about is a bond, but before I talk about position 2, let me just briefly say what a bond is, maybe clearly, but a bond is a way for government to borrow money. So when we get to the propositions and they ask you for a $10 bond, it's a way for the state of California to borrow money. It's somewhat like a mortgage. When you purchase your home, you borrow all the money from a lending institution. The seller is paid off, and now you pay back that over 15 or 30 years, depending on how you finance your home. Well, that's what the state of California does. Bonds are generally used for major capital outlays, schools, dams, major expenses. They're not limited to that, but that's typical habits. The thinking being that it's not the people right now that are going to benefit from that building. It's going to take many years. So down the road, other people are kind of benefiting from what is expended. So it's reasonable to think that those people will be paying for the bond. All right. So the first question is Proposition 2. Should the voters let the state sell 10 billion in bonds to help build and repair public schools and community colleges? So currently we have about 10,000 public schools in California, and then there are 115 community colleges. This bond will renovate and have new construction, pay for renovations, new construction, career technical education, and some of the charters. About 8.5 million would be for K-12 education or TK-12. Some of you might not know that now are educating 4-year-olds. More classrooms needed, but in fact, they require different kinds of classrooms because they generally have a bathroom in the room, since 4-year-olds don't go down the hallway to the bathroom by themselves. So those kinds of things. So it's TK-12. Let's see what else. There's also a mechanism in proposition. Besides asking for money, it is changing the formula. So currently in California, if a district wants to access state funds, they have to match by 50%. So you have to have local funds of 50%. You apply to the state, they give you 50%. That's how we pay for a new school. some poorer districts that have lower socioeconomic tax base or residents have struggled to meet that match. So Proposition 2 is changing the match to 45% by the district, 55% by the state. So supporters say the bond will pay for badly needed repairs and security improvements, thereby making schools and community colleges safer. Opponents say 2 makes taxpayers pay bond interest over many years, and the money will go to wasteful construction projects instead of classroom instruction. The supporters are California Teachers Association, the School Nurses Association, Community College League of California. The opponents are Assemblyman Bill Aside and the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association. So yes means the state could borrow $10 billion and no means that they could not borrow. Any questions about Measure Prop 2? Yes.
Looks like the slide said it would be paid over 35 years,
35.
100 million a year.
Yes.
So by my math, that means second year, we're gonna have to repay $17.5 billion.
For 10 million, for 10 billion, excuse me. Yes, that's true. Thank you for doing the math. I did that too, and I just didn't say it.
Proposition number 3. So proposition number 3 says, should the California Constitution be amended to define marriage as a fundamental right for all, sex or race, or language, that states marriage is only for women? Now, at some level, people said, didn't we already do this? And the answer is, yeah, we did already. So next slide. What this proposition is doing is aligning the United States Constitution, California's Constitution, because our language is not current. We had proposition passed in 2014, and that was finding a marriage currently. The Supreme Court overrode that, which qualifies to, and our Constitution does not reflect. Back to the California Constitution, it says marriage can exist. United States Supreme Court has some to outlaw same-sex couples is the same as opposite. California now allows same place, so it would not change the actions of the couple. It would change the Constitution to reflect the practice. It does two things. It enshrines marriage equality regardless of gender orientation. The change in power cost for the state. Let's go zero then. Let's go to the supporters. The supporters say that the California Constitution should affirm marriage equality, which is the law of the United States. They also believe that Proposition 3 would protect the fundamental right regardless of race, gender. And that's part of the concept of having an insurance. Now, the opponents say that same-sex marriage is already legal, so there's really no need to change California practices. They also say it removes all rules for marriage, opening the door to child marriages, theft, and now the supporters also say that it does take action to proactively protect against future attempts that might happen marriage equality. It does not change the laws regarding the requirement number of people in a marriage or the existing right of clergy to either perform or decline to perform. Now, additionally, the opponents say that it removes all the rules. It opens the door to the possibility of child marriage. That because the language is unclear, without any safeguards, it opens the door for those things to occur. A yes vote will change the California Constitution so that it guarantees marriage equality and protects the fundamental right to marry, regardless of gender. And no vote, California, exactly as it is. Question? Yes.
So is this, an example of trying to be preemptive about other rights being taken away that, further more in the U.S. Constitution?
I believe that it is. I don't know that it says that. It says that it's through the supporters that they're trying to take up to prevent that. Point would want to proposition number 4.
I get another bond. It's all about spending money today. Proposition 4. You know, propositions, there's 10, as we said, 10 of them. Propositions can create new laws, amend existing laws, or amend the Constitution. And not 10 propositions tonight, we have all of the above. So the question is, should the voters let the state sell 10 billion in bonds for various projects to reduce climate risks and impacts? It authorizes the next slide. It authorizes that authorizes funds for the following. And the order that I'm going to read it are the amounts that are allocated for each: drought, flood, and water supply. There are concerns about safe drinking water throughout the state of California. Forest health and wildfire prevention, sea level rise and coastal areas, land conservation and habitat restoration, energy infrastructure, parks, extreme heat, and farms and agriculture. Supporters say Prop 4 would help reduce the impact of growing threats of the droughts, fires, flooding, and lack of clean water. Our state will save billions by avoiding and reducing damage from wildfires, droughts, and floods. Opponents say bonds are the most expensive way to fund government spending and should not be used. The supporters of the Prop 4 are the National Wildlife Federation, CAL FIRES, Clean Water Action, and numerous others. The opponents are the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association and Senate Minority Leader Brian Jones. Okay. Any questions about what Proposition 4 is asking? So a yes vote means the state is authorized to sell $2 in bonds, and the no vote means that they are not.
Proposition 5 allows local bonds for affordable housing and public infrastructure with a 55% goal. Essentially, Proposition 5 is changing, not for all, but just for these particular areas. As you know, the state has required a greater number of affordable housing available in all our communities. There's clearly a need. Bonded is by a formula they determine each city has to have part of the way that those are financed, but part of the way they're financed are through these local bonds. The current threshold is 66. It's a pretty high threshold, and it often makes it for so the question that's being asked is local bond measures to fund housing for low and public infrastructure projects allowed to pass with a 55%. 56. The situation is, as we said, it's 66.7 currently, and affordable housing clearly an issue throughout the state of lowering the voter requirements of types of 5% proposal. Fiscal impact is that there's little effect on the state budget, but it ripples to the local budget. Have to be mindful of. That's where the cost will lie. Supporters of this proposition say that it gives local communities more tools to make housing. It also allows local voters to address such as housing and one of the supporters say that it does provide accountability, and it also allows individual communities to have a voice in how this situation is addressed. And it's providing tools to allow that. And the opponents are coming from a different perspective. The opponents say that Proposition 5 changes the existing protections for high debt that is caused by bond issues. It also says it pushes the cost of infrastructure onto local governments and taxpayers while they're being controlled. All right. So what we want to do is, I guess, build a threshold to pass bonds for affordable housing and infrastructure to 55%, 66.7. Although it currently is 66. Yeah.
It would be understanding that when you say with houses, but infrastructure, it could be anything, how do they define infrastructure? It could be a park, free, how do they define it?
It is true, but definitely, it's, so it affects the local ability to do the bonds, right?
Right.
So,
It does define it here. It says the bond money can projects such as building roads, fire stations. It can also be used to help pay for housing for people with disabilities. Current law requires the 66.7%. Well, I would say that it could allow, in Venetia, based on the city determine if they could vote for a local bond in order to help support affordable housing or infrastructure. Make that determination if they felt to add revenue to do that.
What are the income requirements in our income levels in Venetia for housing?
I don't have an answer to that. Mario's holding his phone. Steve looks, you know what the thresholds are.
You're putting me on the spot, Mayor. For context, when we think about affordable housing, I believe recently, affordable housing for Venetia now is tied to the Bay Area rate, which I believe is about $104,000. Which means that if you, as a household, are bringing in less than $104,000, you qualify for affordable housing. So that's what affordable housing means in Venetia, is a household at $104,000.
Yes. How bonds work. So a bond is a funding structure that borrowing money, as explained, is borrowing money over time. And your money is being borrowed by the local entity. That's bond to the, and it's repaid. Yeah, Janet?
I think that's the question is that we pay it on our water, on our bill. When we get a bill for protecting our real estate.
Well, there are different kinds of bonds. So it would determine how the, Weaver, Mario, do you have a thought? So if there was an affordable housing, study a bond, how would that money pay through the citizens? So, I think that's the reason.
To be clear, there are no local bonds for Venetia on this ballot, nor do we have any plans in the future. So how this could impact Venetia, you would have, for example, if you wanted to pass a bond So one way to do that is you can put it on the property tax bill. So someone noted earlier, right? That would be a tax you would pay annually on your property tax, and those proceeds would go to the city, and we did to build something, right? We would use it to build senior housing here if we so chose to do that. That would be one way in which this would impact it, because prior we would need a 2/3 majority. This proposition would lower it to 55. I would assume so too would an infrastructure. So for example, we are talking about Measure F, which is a sales tax. And because the citizens put it on, it only needs a simple majority. Had the city put on a specific tax for infrastructure, it would have needed a 2/3. So it's conceivable that if this were to pass in the future, that would be an option, lowering it from 2/3 to 55%. Should we have something specific to infrastructure? Would be two examples of how this could apply to Venetia, but to be clear, nothing like that is on the ballot this go around.
Yes.
Changing the percentage number, not changing the locus of where the bonding, where the new housing is corresponds.
Absolutely.
Just changing
The numbers.
the.
So her question, if you weren't able to hear it, is this just voting threshold and not the affordable? Together, the answer is yes. This is what this is designed to do. Lower the voting threshold from 6, 7 to 55 only in affordable housing.
So the simply the same that thing now, it will be just after the specific numbers report.
But I'll tell you, the different number is not. Yeah. No, it's not. You're right.
Thank you. And while we're on the subject of bonds, which seems to be the topic, 3% of the general fund of California is spent to service bonds. The current level, just for your information. All right, Proposition 6. The question is, Proposition 6 eliminates the constitutional provision of involuntary servitude for incarcerated persons. This would result in a legislative constitutional amendment. So the question, should the California Constitution be amended to remove the provision that allows involuntary servitude to be used as punishment for a crime, prohibit punishment for refusing a work assignment, and allow voluntary work assignments in exchange for credit to reduce sentence? Thank you. Head of your name, David. All right. Take a second to look at that. Supporters say that Prop 6 restores human dignity. I'm sorry, before I get to the supporters, I skipped the part, excuse me. California is one of 16 states that currently allows voluntary service. The last 4 states to change it in the recent election was Alabama, Oregon, Tennessee, and Vermont. Prop 6 still allows prisoners to work to earn time credits, but bans punishment for refusal to work. Supporters say that it restores human dignity by ending forced labor, which constitutes slavery and violates human rights. They also say it enhances public safety by prioritizing rehabilitation. I will say that this position has passed both the Senate and the Assembly and has overwhelming bipartisan support. There were no arguments submitted against this proposition. Yes, questions, please. A constitutional amendment goes through the legislature and then it has to come to the public, to the voters. It needs both. It needs 2 mechanisms to change the Constitution. It's a good question. She asked, if it already went through the legislature, why are we talking about it? Well, it takes 2 steps. Any other questions?
The next one is Proposition 32, which is raising. It asks, should California raise its statewide dollars an hour, January 1st, 2026. Each year based on. So this is a citizens initiative, and it requires a simple majority to pass. Current minimum wage is $60 an hour, although 40 municipalities currently have a higher level. This change would not lower those that are paying $20 an hour. It only lift up dollars an hour. Would raise it by 2026. The fiscal impact, according to the legislative analyst, this is kind of an interesting. Present two sides of the coin, so it's difficult to know. On one level, there is that higher wages will increase government costs, revenues will likely increase. On the other side, the other perspective is that lower the use of CalFresh, and local and state programs provide support for low-income families. Therefore, could save hundreds of dollars a year. So on one hand, they're saying save money in there. Now, supporters are saying that raising the minimum wage is going to lift up the millions of workers, economic fairness. It also talks about the reduction of support needs for social service programs helps to not only save costs, but also to it improves the economy because people now have greater discretionary use of money and they're better able to spend basic survival needs and generate to the economy. Now, opponents say that supporters of this are Joe Sandberg, public poverty advocate. I know I butchered that name myself. One fair wage. Here local raised over $10 million for this proposition. Opponents say that raising the minimum will actually hurt businesses, raise prices and cause job loss. Cost on the part of the employer. They are passing that on and so on to who receive the service. Taxes may be raised if so this opposition. This was by the California Grocers Association, Restaurant National Federation of Independent Businesses, and they raised $65,000 in opposition. So a yes vote is the minimum wage. First 2026, as it is at $60. Questions? All of this is straightforward. All right, Prop 33. The question is, should the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act of 1995 be repealed so local governments can regulate rents? So, some background. In 1995, there was a law that was put on the books, and it said that rent control could only happen, prevents rent control on single-family homes and on housing built after 1995. So they said if there was going to be rent control, it had to be on something that was already in existence in 1995. Nothing new that was built. So since then, rent control is not on anything that's 29 years or newer. Currently, Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Jose, and Santa Monica control. That's about a quarter of the population of California live in municipalities that have rent control. The rest of the state does not. Current law limits rent increases, not rent control, but just any landlord's increase to 5% plus inflation. So there are some state guidelines right now around raising rents. Californians pay about 50% higher than the national average for rent, which is quite amazing. Prop 33 eliminates
So that's just fact. Prop 33 eliminates Costa-Hawkins, and cities and counties can control rents for any house. They can also limit how much a landlord may increase rents when a new renter moves in. The proposition does not impact those municipalities that currently have rent control. The local city would make those determinations. So supporters say that Prop 33 will allow local governments to protect renters. Local voters would be able to decide on whether and how to control rents. Prop 33 would help lower the cost of living in California for renters. It would slow the exodus of Californians leaving the state because they are unable to afford housing. So the supporters say it helps with the cost of living in California and protects renters. Opponents say Prop 33 will make the housing crisis worse. It would reduce the construction of affordable housing. It will make it harder to become a homeowner or find a place to rent. Prop 33 will drive up costs for renters and buyers. So I think the argument was I'm less likely to invent and build a new apartment complex if I'm going to be limited on how much I can rent. I think that was kind of the summary of the argument, that investment in new affordable housing would be impacted because the revenue generated for the builder would decrease. I hope I'm saying that. That's how I understood it. I guess read it there. The potential fiscal impacts are very, very hard to judge. There will be significant effects on renters and landlords. That is clear. But some renters would spend less. The value of renting housing could decline. Landlords would see a decrease in revenue. The state could receive less property taxes because the value of land may decrease. So that could be an impact for the state. Right. Next slide, I think. Oh, well, I guess that's the last one. All right. I do want to say a word or two about who supports them. There was on the ballot, there are 16 supporters of Prop 33. There were 11 organizations against it. The supporters were the California Democratic Party, Veterans Voice, California Nurses Association, ATF, Alliance for Retired Citizens, and the AIDS Healthcare Organization. And I'm saying that for a reason because that impacts the later proposition. Those against are California Small Business Association, Conference of Carpenters, California Chamber of Commerce, California Senior Alliance, and California Association of Realtors, and and the National, can I read my own writing, sorry, National Association of Realtors. So there's a lot of money being spent on this one in both directions. The actually $39 million supported and $87 million to oppose it. Most of the money support came from the AIDS Healthcare Fund. The rest came from a variety of entities. Yes, do I have questions? Yes. That's you. Ms. Gibbs.
Sorry. Clarification. So this, we've been almost used like a statewide rent control, but in fact, it's giving communities the right to have the rent.
It repeals the ban, it repeals the Costa-Hawkins Act and allows local cities and counties to determine rent control for their community. So if it happens, it doesn't put it into place, the city would have to.
Could this create a situation where the nation could have the rent control and thereby create some
My understanding is that if this Costa-Hawkins is repealed, each city could determine whether or not they would have rent control. So yes, the answer is yes, the nation could vote on that. It wouldn't be put on them. It would be up to them. Yes. Steve?
My understanding is that they can't have rent control now, so Hawkins does, is the city cannot impose rent control on single family residents
Yes.
and duplexes for the owner of them and it would eliminate that limitation.
I thought I said that, but it doesn't, it does not allow it for single family homes or any property 29 years or younger. So apartments that are 10 years old are not safe. So take that away.
I don't know, you can speak softly, and I just want to make sure people have a chance to hear, yeah, I want to. Yeah.
Summarizing that, that one more time. Why don't you
Share that because you're sharing the different.
What she had asked is, voting yes for this, repealing Costa-Hawkins would encourage low-income housing, specifically here in Benicia. What I said is the opposition would be arguing that it would make it potentially less attractive to developers to build low-income housing here if they knew that they were going to be constrained by their potential profit or overall profitability of their build. So it could be more difficult for us to achieve our while the other than.
So let me be, I'm gonna read what yes and no vote means, because it's complicated. So a yes vote means state law would not limit the kinds of rent control laws cities and counties could have. A no vote on this means the current state law would continue to limit the kinds of rent control laws cities and counties could have. Correct? Did you understand that? All right. Thank you.
All right, Proposition 34. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a question here. Sorry. Yes.
What could, council, how is that going to change the legal plan?
I didn't hear your question. Could we repeat the question?
How would that change Benicia? If there is a yes vote, how is it going to change for us in Benicia?
What would the impact be if we vote yes on Proposition 33? Excuse me.
There's no way back.
Well, it's correct that there's no impact, but if down the road, the city decided we wanted to put rent control, for example, on single family homes, they could do that. They wouldn't be restricted. They have to go on the ballot, right? But if they wanted to do that, they wouldn't be restricted. Or homes built after the year that was. Thank you.
Okay. You got your question answered? All right.
Goodness, I have 10. When I saw 34, my hair turned white. Wait a minute, how many? No, there are only 10, so we're on the home stretch, just hang it a little longer. Okay, this one is, I have to admit, I'm gonna try and remember funding for the that are in favor of the largest contributor was Ally AIDS healthcare. This proposition has been brought to partially in response to that. So it says, should certain healthcare providers be required to spend 98% of revenues for federal discount prescription drug program on direct patient care? And should the state permanently authorize to negotiate drug? So that's what it says. Now, what we want to talk about is what's currently happening. Currently, healthcare providers earn revenues from federal drug discount program. They can decide how to spend that Medi-Cal provides coverage to low. So they are in a profit, they are able to determine how to spend that profit as long as it follows. So they're not, falling on vacation. So here's the current situation. Healthcare providers earn revenues. They decide how that income. Medi-Cal provides coverage to people. Now, to create more rules about how healthcare providers spend money are earned from the discount rate, allows the state to also permanently negotiate Medi-Cal. Here's the part that's the criteria, because you notice the word not all, certain. So they developed a criteria, and the criteria said the healthcare provider must participate in federal discount rate. 2, they have to, over a 10-year period, have spent more than $100 million patient care. 3, they have to own and operate multifamily housing, at least 500 severe violations. So in order to meet that criteria, those are the only folks that will be impacted by this. And there's only one that currently fits that, and that's healthcare. It could cost millions of dollars, could say it will, to identify and punish providers who violate the law, fines that would be imposed for them, but they didn't comply with the rule. Excellent. So what do the supporters say? The supporters say that Proposition 34, that is derived from the program, mind you, that is not currently required to do that, but this is what it would do. And it will make the discount program permanent. So then the opponents say that Proposition 34 is targeted on one healthcare provider that supports rent control. In fact, they are setting to weaponize some. Federal law allows profits from drug discounts, nonprofit. So that's what they're talking about. And it is 6, they also there, and it says it's not a necessity for this has a, if you were to vote yes for the restriction by certain that criteria. If you vote no, yes. Don't. My question was who paid. She wanted to know who paid for it. I don't have that. Who paid for the board? Yeah, yes. And okay. Any other questions for her? Does anybody know who the one healthcare provider is? Yeah. It's the group that spent all the money on people. And so just want that. I don't AIDS healthcare, I think, provides housing for AIDS. I think that's part of, they provide help support low income housing for AIDS patients. So that's where they're in the housing market. They also do jobs and everything. Yeah. Okay. Going on, 35. Okay, the question from Proposition 5. Should California make permanent an existing tax on healthcare plans
to provide ongoing funding for Med-Cal and other healthcare services. Great. Oh, lost my spot. Yeah. So, my apologies. So what Proposition 34 does is to make permanent the existing tax on managed health. 35 does is, I'm sorry, I'm gonna start again. 35, it makes permanent a law that is currently set to expire in 2026. So this law has been in place since 2009, off and on. It keeps coming back for renewal, and the proposition is asking that they make it permanent. The prop would make the existing temporary tax permanent, as well as create new rules for how the money can be spent. Generally, rules require the state to use more of the revenue to increase funding for Medi-Cal and for other health programs. This proposition prevents the state redirecting funds for non-healthcare purposes. So currently, under the current law, the state has flexibility in how it uses the money. This proposition would say it has to be used for healthcare. It couldn't be used to offset other things in their general fund. Supporters say that Prop 35 protects and expands access to healthcare for all patients. There are strong accountability requirements that ensure money is spent on patient care. It has the support of the California Medical Association, American Academy of Pediatrics, California Dental Association, Planned Parenthood, and the Academy of Family Physicians. The opponents say that it is the process that's a problem, not so much the fact that using a ballot box budgeting is not the best way, best practices. That what this proposition does is it takes decisions away from the legislature who have the money in the general fund, and it limits their flexibility. And they also say that it could inadvertently lower revenues through the Medicare. I would tell you this one is extreme. I did my absolute best to understand it, but basically the bottom line is that it makes permanent something that's coming to the legislature, to the public every few years, and this makes it permanent. It has the support of the medical community. It does not have the support of people that believe that the legislature should determine how money is spent, not put it on the ballot. That's the best I can do on that one for you. Go ahead and ask me a question. Let's see if I can answer it. No, seriously, are there any questions? I read a lot.
There was no argument against Proposition 35 submitted.
Thank you. I did not give you a rebuttal because there wasn't one. So I looked it up and I found some that was about the ballot box budgeting. Interesting. Okay, that's all I have to say on that. So I guess a yes vote would make permanent the current law instead of having to bring it back to the voters again.
All right, we're in the home stretch. This is it. Proposition 36, that kind of brings back memories for those of us who recall some legislation happened. This allows felony charges and increases sentence. Should California allow people to be charged with felony for possessing certain drugs? That's the defendant has 2 prior drugs. The reason I say it may bring back memories is there was a time when that was in place. Laws were changed because the current situation in 2014 had overcrowding in the prisons, and there were a lot of money diverted from rehabilitation in order to create housing, in order to house people who have been convicted. And so the measure then, the other way, was to develop rehabilitation programs and
create other means to address this type of crime. And that happened in 2014. Changing the nonviolent crimes, drug possession, shoplifting, unless someone has a prior conviction. Now, you might imagine why that's reason is because of the smash and grab that we're built in communities, that they're happening on high traffic tourist areas. And as a result, this is the other way. And it's saying they want to turn back into felons, fire sense. It's going to have an increased cost local for prisons, jails, treatment, likely between tens to hundreds of. So that's, the conundrum. This is where we're going, and whether or not it's going to effectively address the problem that's its intent. So the next one. Supporters for Prop 36 say that tougher laws are. This measure will reduce crime and safer by holding repeat offenders, thieves, and drug dealers. Now, the opponents say it would make California less safe by stopping crime and drug. It would cost taxpayers the dollars, and it would ultimately result in imprisonment of people. So, to some degree, the conversation around punishment and this structure poses. So, in this case, look at that. Yes, turn to the greater to increase that fire crimes. No. Yes. We'll come back. Any other questions? Not easy, and some of them are just as.
I understand the rehabilitation part.
Some of the funding that has been diverted, not having prison, directed to rehabilitation programs and drug treatment programs and outside. No, both within and outside. That is diverting people so they are not incarcerated, but they have free rehabilitation, have mandatory drug treatment programs. So that's where our current. So in this case, what would the opponents are saying, what would happen is these programs funding for those types of services be redirected because it'd be more incarcerated. And so there's a housing for folks that yes.
It's interesting. Drug possession and shoplifting together. And on one page it's drug possession, and then on the other one it was about sale. So I'm hoping that when we read the whole
with greater clarity. Yeah, this is and that often does happen. They're want to get drug dealers, which is different from people who are utilizing selling drugs. There's a whole array, there's a continuum there that,
So I believe that kindness is down in California, in fact, it's down in California states except for specific areas. And would it be fair to say that there's some positive result from the proposition that's passed in
2014. One can say that, although the opponents clearly are not saying that. I think the truth is probably that I think they're having a problem. But what's going on right now responding to that situation. Is this correct? Or we'll just have to wrestle with that. Is this, because people, being fearful to go into a mall, they're shopping in an Apple store, and just start taking things. All those things are very real. No. This proposal, this proposition is designed. I didn't say it on this one or on the other one. I'll tell you where they are though. It's in the. Yeah, it's in, I haven't gone, to be honest. It's the general election voter guide, and under each one it does tell who has. On this document, there are some additional resources. Legislative analysis office, fair political parties practice, as well as ballot and count matters. And each one of these live, some of them are calendar. Last slide. Not that. Look forward, have the bookmarks on the table as you leave. Give an opportunity. Vote for 411.org. Objective place to get information. I just encourage you to take a look at that. There is a walk outside that will help you that if you get election. Right. Now, the purpose of tonight was to give you information about the state, because that is one of the primary rules of. But a second arm is in fact advocacy. There are some positions where voters as in fact stand, which we did not share tonight. That's because we want, if you feel that you're interested, there are people who say, hey, Ronnie, how do I vote with the league? And are interested in which you cannot see. There's a live link at the bottom and tell you what the League of Women Voters recommendations are. That is an site. League of Women Voters. It's sincerely thank you for taking the time tonight. Calendars, we have the state forms, and we have 4 individuals that are running for city council. Unfortunately, you won't have the mayoral candidate prior to that, and you have to have both candidates run a form, otherwise it's called together. He was unable, Kirby was unable to schedule to make it for that. Sorry for that, but I do want to say that her had a forum on October 2nd, and the Rancho Benicia has one coming up Wednesday. So, and the Mariana candidates are going to be present there. So wish all of you the very best. Janet. No, he said the chairs are fine. We don't have to do anything. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
I go on the 14th.
I am gonna.
I didn't have the answer.
Oh, crappy.
And then I have some contract. Okay, so, oh, no. Yeah, I do. Okay, okay. Now I'm done. There I'm done. So what I'll get the whole time. I'll get back. And no, I'm not. Nothing's not so much fun, so we're. Happens. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, there you go. All right. So,
Hello. Hello. How are you? I'm a little confused. Do you want any assistance with what's going on in here? No, I'm good.